Impeachment trial. Why Democrats are demanding to hear from one of President Donald Trump's former national security advisors. Fight for the unborn. We speak with a pro-life advocate on her questions to a Democratic presidential candidate who supports abortion. Never again. It is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, what Catholic leaders are saying. And a message of hope. We'll tell you about the EWTN film that was screened today at the Vatican. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 27, 2020.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. A case of the coronavirus is confirmed in Arizona. That means there are at least 5 such cases in the U.S. right now in Washington State, Chicago, Southern California, and Arizona. But the threat may be growing. The U.S. State Department urged Americans to reconsider travel to China because of the fast-spreading disease.
A game-changing announcement from China's health minister. People infected with the coronavirus can spread the disease before showing symptoms.
The contagiousness of the patient is so much more evident. There's a longer period of time where that person can spread the disease.
Although some health officials questioned the statement, others believe it's better to err on the side of caution.
I'm urging HHS, Health and Human Services, Federal, to follow the CDC's proactive lead and declare a public formal health emergency for the coronavirus. And in doing so, it will unlock tens of millions of dollars for the CDC to access.
The virus is confirmed in about a dozen countries, including China, the U.S., and France, and now in Canada.
As a country, we've learned a lot since the SARS outbreak in 2003, and this has allowed our country and all levels of government to work very closely together to ensure that we are prepared.
The Director General of the World Health Organization tweeted Sunday he's heading to Beijing to find out more about the coronavirus outbreak.
My crystal ball says the next time the WHO committee meets, I think it is likely that they will declare this a public health emergency of international concern.
Per le persone malate a causa del virus che si è diffuso in Cina.
Yesterday, Pope Francis prayed for people infected by the coronavirus.
Well, China's all-out effort to stop the coronavirus from spreading has led the government to ban the trade of wild animals. A market in Wuhan that sold wild animals is suspected to be the source of the outbreak. So far, at least 81 people have died. One person is injured after a nighttime rocket attack that struck the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. No group has claimed responsibility for that strike. Violence also continued today between Iraqi security forces and anti-government protesters. Police used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The country has been gripped by rallies criticizing alleged government corruption, high unemployment, and Iranian influence in Iraqi politics. A spokesperson for the Taliban says a mystery crash in eastern Afghanistan was a U.S. aircraft. The United States military says that it is investigating the reports. Footage appears to show the remains of an aircraft used by Americans for electronic surveillance. Today is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and Catholic leaders are calling for prayers and remembrance. In a statement released Saturday, Europe's Catholic bishops say in part, quote, "We appeal to the modern world for reconciliation and peace, for respect for each nation's right to exist, and to freedom, to independence, to maintain its own culture." Pope Francis also addressed the anniversary, saying the world must make a vow to never let the Holocaust happen again.
Ed è doverosa la memoria.
At his Sunday talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says indifference is not an acceptable response, and he asked the entire world to take a moment to pray and reflect on the atrocities. Survivors gathered at Auschwitz today and asked the world to address a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. Pope Francis names a new personal secretary. Father Gonzalo Aemilius is shown here with the Holy Father, a native of Uruguay. He previously worked with street children and has known the Pope since 2006. The 40-year-old is one of the Pope's 2 assistants. The other is a priest from Egypt. And back here in Washington, a divided Supreme Court today allowed the Trump administration to put in place a policy connecting the use of public benefits with whether immigrants could become permanent residents. The justice's order came by a 5-4 vote and a reversed a ruling from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New York. An upcoming book from former National Security Advisor John Bolton undercuts one of the president's key defense arguments. Bolton says the president wanted to withhold security aid from Ukraine until the country investigated political rival Joe Biden. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports now. Mark?
Tracy, John Bolton says in the forthcoming book that hundreds of millions of dollars in security aid was withheld from Ukraine at the president's direction. President Trump's legal team has denied this, so has the president, and today he says he hasn't seen the latest accusation.
I haven't seen a manuscript, but I can tell you nothing was ever said to John Bolton, but I have not seen a manuscript. I guess he's writing a book. I have not seen it.
The president adds on Twitter, "I never told John Bolton that the aid to Ukraine was tied to investigations into Democrats, including the Bidens. In fact, he never complained about this at the time of his very public termination. If John Bolton said this, it was only to sell a book." John Bolton sent his book manuscript to the White House for review. It wants him to remove material it considers classified, including direct quotes from meetings with foreign leaders. Democrats are now demanding sworn testimony from Bolton and other key witnesses in the impeachment trial. The president responds, the Democrat-controlled House never even asked John Bolton to testify. It is up to them, not up to the Senate. Today at the White House, the president welcomed the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. President Trump is set to unveil his proposal to bring peace between Israelis and Palestinians, though Palestinians have already rejected his plan.
We're going to show a plan. It's been worked on by everybody, and we'll see whether or not it catches hold. If it does, that'd be great. And if it doesn't, we can live with it too. But I think it might have a chance.
The president's plan for Middle East peace is expected to be publicly unveiled tomorrow during day 2 of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit here to the White House. The deal is expected to be favorable to Israel. Again, Palestinians aren't so happy. They've come out and said this deal will not constitute a basis for resolving the conflict. Tracy.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. On Capitol Hill, Senate Democrats used the new information from the Bolton book to push for his testimony. A number of Republicans, on the other hand, remain intent on wrapping up the trial without new witnesses. Catholic news agency's Matt Hadro reports now from Capitol Hill. Matt?
Good evening, Tracy. The number 3 Republican in the Senate, John Barrasso of Wyoming, dismisses the Bolton news as an effort to sell books. But Democrats, especially leader Chuck Schumer, say that the president and his team are working hard to suppress evidence.
We have a witness with firsthand evidence of the president's actions for which he is on trial. He is ready and willing to testify. How can Senate Republicans not vote to call that witness and request his documents?
Lead prosecutor Adam Schiff has been pushing for Bolton's testimony.
We ought to not only have John Bolton testify, but we ought to see what he wrote down in his notes at the time.
The pressure is mounting for Senate Republicans to vote with the Democrats to demand sworn testimony from new witnesses.
It's up to 4 Senate Republicans, just 4 Senate Republicans, to ensure that John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, Mr. Blair, and Mr. Duffy testify in the Senate trial.
Schumer specifies the witnesses Democrats want: former National Security Advisor John Bolton, acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, Robert Blair, senior advisor to Mulvaney, and Michael Duffy, a senior administration official. But the president's lawyers say there is no cause for new evidence.
The transcript shows that the president did not condition either security assistance or a meeting on anything.
And even moderate Republicans say it's not time yet.
It's increasingly apparent that it would be important to hear from John Bolton. I, of course, will make a final decision on witnesses after we've heard from not only the prosecution but also the defense.
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska says she's curious as to what John Bolton has to say. Murkowski is one of the Republicans under pressure from Democrats to vote in favor of calling witnesses. That vote is expected to come up in the Senate later this week. Tracy?
Catholic news agency's Matt Hadro reporting for us tonight from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Matt. And joining me now to offer his analysis is Christopher Bedford. He is senior editor at the Federalist and the author of The Art of the Donald. Chris, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what are your thoughts on the reported revelations from Bolton's manuscript?
It's incredible how quickly media got to work on this story. If you look up bombshell Bolton, you'll see bombshell in the headline of USA Today, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, CBS, ABC. It goes on and on and on. This echo chamber that pushes this forward and then goes after Republican senators like Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, and says, oh, now you're going to want this witness. I'm not sure if I'm more sympathetic to what the Trump defense team has said on this matter, which is that despite what John Bolton might say and what some people who were clearly against this decision might say, the president never linked this with the Ukrainians and he never told the Ukrainians this. They were unaware of this, and the aid was not ultimately held up. So it would seem likely that Mitch McConnell is still going to want to push on without having to expand this beyond what the Democratic House already did, and is not going to want to let them drag this out anymore.
Do you think it's damaging to the president?
It's only damaging in that they may open up witnesses, which would slow this process down, but it'd be more damaging to people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are trying to win the nomination, who are now going to spend a lot more time maybe in Washington, or to see this go dragged out into the court battles.
Yeah, you mentioned witnesses. Do you think this increases the pressure to call Bolton as a witness?
It does, but there's no reason for Republicans to look at this and say Bolton should be called, but not Hunter Biden, who is integral to this. Somebody who said he thinks the president said this is interesting, as is Hunter Biden.
Do you think could the testimony help clear up any confusion at all?
I don't think that anything will be cleared up in this country on this matter for decades.
Okay. And obviously, do you think it would be helpful?
To which side? To America?
There you go.
To America? I don't think anything about this so far has been very helpful to America. It's just another example of we're never reaching a conclusion. We're never actually getting facts. People are divided on their opinions, and they're not coming together. We haven't had something that unites us very well in quite some time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate that.
I'll come back with better news next
Okay,
time.
Thank you. Christopher Bedford, senior editor at the Federalist and the author of The Art of the Donald. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Coming up, a pro-life Democrat tells us about her question on abortion to a presidential candidate. And we remember former basketball star Kobe Bryant.
With just 1 week to go before the Iowa Democratic caucuses, a pro-life Democrat takes on one of the top candidates on his and the party's position on abortion.
Do you want the support of pro-life Democrats, pro-life Democratic voters? There are about 21 million of us. And if so, would you support more moderate platform language in the Democratic Party to ensure that the party of diversity and inclusion really does include everybody?
Well, I respect where you're coming from, and I hope to earn your vote, but I'm not going to try to earn your vote by tricking you. I am pro-choice, and I believe that a woman ought to be able to make that decision.
Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America, taking on the former South Bend, Indiana mayor in last night's Fox News Channel's town hall with Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg went on to say that he supports the position of the Democratic Party and the, quote, framework of Roe versus Wade. Kristen Day joins us now by Skype via Skype from Topeka, Kansas, where she is meeting with lawmakers. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I tell you, that was quite the exchange between you and Pete Buttigieg. I know you asked him two direct and basic questions. What did you think of his response?
Well, the interesting thing was his response was about his position on abortion, which I already knew. And I did not ask him for his position on abortion at all. What I asked was, does he want the vote of pro-life Democratic voters? And would he be open to discussing platform language that would make the party inclusive for people like me who oppose abortion?
I know the audience last night applauded the former mayor when he stated his pro-abortion stance. What was it like to be there last night as a pro-life Democrat?
You know, honestly, I was very encouraged because after I asked my question and they went to commercial break, everybody around me turned around and they said it was a very good question and they didn't like Mayor Pete's answer. So these were Mayor Pete's supporters who were concerned. And after the town hall ended, people came up to me and said, thanks for answering the question. I didn't get one criticism, only support.
You pointed out that there are tens of millions of pro-life Democrats across the country. Do you think the Democratic Party as a whole is making a mistake in not addressing their concerns and maybe not taking their vote seriously?
Absolutely, they are. You know, we've been marginalized for a long time. We have pulled the D lever and we've supported our party. And, you know, what we get in return now is being kicked out. They are establishing litmus tests. The Democratic Attorney General's Association has a litmus test now against pro-life Democrats. They will not endorse candidates who oppose abortion. The Act Blue site, which is a campaign site for Democrats, will not let pro-life Democrat PAC put their site up there to raise money for Democratic candidates because they're pro-life. So this is what we get in return: more litmus tests and more language saying that we don't belong.
On Friday, President Trump became the first U.S. sitting president to address the March for Life in person. I know you were there. What did you think of his remarks and about the fact that he was actually there?
So, I think from a pro-life perspective, it was a very good thing to have a sitting president come and bring attention to this issue that is important to, look at all the people who showed up for the March for Life. So I think it was good that he showed up and brought attention to the march and the fact that millions of Americans oppose abortion. It was disappointing to see him criticize the Democratic Party so much, and not recognize the Democratic pro-life Democrats who were there at the march, marching in unity with which everything that brings us together as pro-lifers that has nothing to do with party, but our united belief that we want to protect babies and protect mothers and support families.
The current field of Democratic candidates is still pretty broad. Are you hopeful that one of them will come forward in support of a more moderate position on abortion? And what would you like to hear from them?
Yes, no, we're still working to try to find a candidate who represents our views. We hope that one of the candidates will come out and say, I want the support of pro-life Democratic voters. So we're waiting for that moment. We're continuing to go on our trip around the country following the Democratic debates and bringing our message and our whole life, pro-life for the whole life banner to all the Democratic debates, and just promoting the fact that there are pro-life Democrats within the party and we belong.
Kristen, you're in Topeka now, meeting with other pro-life Democrats. Quickly, what's your message to them?
So our message to them is they're not alone. So many pro-life Democratic legislators are attacked by their own party, pressured to vote against their conscience. So we're here to tell those the pro-life Democrats here that we stand with them, and the people that we've met here are very appreciative of to know that there are other pro-life Democrats around the country who have their back when it comes to this issue.
Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America. Thanks again for coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
On Saturday, one day after the March for Life, 4 national pro-life organizations held a training event for grassroots activists. They received training and more than a little encouragement.
For you, the student kind of attending the first ever pro-life conference, wondering what you're doing here and how you got here. For you, the battle-ready person just looking for the best place to insert yourself to save the most lives, today has been created for you.
Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life of America was among the speakers, as was Scott Walker, former Republican governor for Wisconsin, and former NFL player and Harvard graduate Matt Burke. Pro-lifers of all ages were given the tools for advancing the culture of life in their local communities. At least one person died after a bus carrying students from a Catholic high school back from the March from Life collided with a car. The bus was carrying students from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky. The accident occurred in their home state. 2 people aboard the bus were taken to the hospital with injuries. Last year, a group of students from Covington Catholic drew national attention for their encounter with a Native American man. The New Orleans Saints professional football team is headed to court to try and prevent the public from seeing emails that it sent to the area's Catholic archdiocese. The Associated Press reports that church officials were seeking help regarding their response to the clergy abuse crisis. Attorneys for around 24 men suing the church say the team helped the Archdiocese of New Orleans conceal crimes. The team denies the charges. The Saints' owner is a practicing Catholic. The sports world is mourning the death of Kobe Bryant, widely considered one of the best basketball players of all time. The 41-year-old and father of 4 was killed in a helicopter crash along with his 13-year-old daughter and 7 other people. Bryant was a star with the Los Angeles Lakers, and fans in the city flocked to the team's arena to pay tribute to him. Bryant was a Catholic and spent much of his childhood in Italy. He is credited his faith with helping him move past a 2003 incident in which he was accused of sexual assault. The charges eventually were dropped. Bryant issued an apology to his accuser, with whom he also reached a settlement in a civil lawsuit. Archbishop Jose Gomez from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles took to Twitter yesterday, writing, "So very sad to hear the news of Kobe Bryant's tragic death this morning. I am praying for him and his family. May he rest in peace, and may our Blessed Mother Mary bring comfort to his loved ones." And you can read more about Kobe Bryant and his Catholic fate at CatholicNewsAgency.com.
Up next, another group of American bishops is in Rome to meet Pope Francis. And we speak with the director of an EWTN movie on a shrine in Ireland.
U.S. bishops from California, Hawaii, and Nevada are in Rome for their 5-year review. The church leaders celebrated Mass this morning in the grotto of St. Peter's Basilica, presided by USCCB's new president, Archbishop Jose Gomez. They then met with Pope Francis, where they had an open conversation about the improvements and the concerns in their diocese. The bishops will be in Rome for the week, visiting a variety of Vatican departments and celebrating Mass at the major basilicas. Today, the Vatican Film Library screened EWTN Ireland's docudrama on the apparitions at Knock, Ireland.
If she could be present at the cross to deal with that for other people around her at the time, she can be present to us now in dealing whatever suffering that we are going through.
The dramatized documentary called Hope looks at how the small Irish village of Knock became a pilgrimage site visited by over 1 million faithful every year. Pope Francis visited the shrine in 2018 during the World Meeting of Families in Dublin. And yesterday at St. Peter's Basilica, a statue of Our Lady of Knock was on display in front of the altar. Campbell Miller, director and producer of the Hope film, joins us now from Rome. Campbell is also EWTN Ireland's head of TV production. Campbell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invite.
Campbell, remind us what happened at Knock in 1879, and also, if you can, tell us why you decided to name the film Hope.
In 1879, it was the 21st of August, and it was a rainy night, and Our Lady, St. Joseph, St. John, and the Lamb of God appeared to the Irish people in Knock. And that was a time in which the Irish people were going through another famine, which people actually didn't realise. And there was a land war, so the Irish people were fighting for their land back so that they could own their own land. So at this time, there was this apparition, and the message was a message of hope. It was to give people hope that things were going to get better, because again, people were still living that could remember back the 30 or 40 years prior, in which the Great Famine, in which there was over 1 million people died and over 1 million people immigrated. So we named the movie Hope because of the message and that things will get better.
Well, Pope Francis visited the shrine in August of 2018. How did his visit make an impact on Irish Catholics?
Yes, that's right. He visited the Knock Shrine, and it was great that he did, because it was an inspiration for Catholics, young and old, that the Pope once again recognised the shrine. And it's a small stepping stone for the church, because the church had been through quite a lot in the previous years with different scandals. And to get that recognition, Pope Francis came, as I mentioned, it's a small step, and the church getting back into the hearts of the Irish people and back into the homes.
I know last October, the Association of Catholic Priests announced a state of concern for the church in Ireland. Why did they do that? And do you think this film will actually bring Catholics back to the church?
They did make that statement, and the Catholic Church, as I mentioned before, has been through quite a lot. Society has become more and more secular. We have more secular governments. We look at the abortion legislation that's come in to north and south of Ireland. So with all of that happening, the Irish people really need a sense of hope that things will get better. And we do hope that when this movie comes out, that people will get to watch it. They will get to see the message of hope that Our Lady, St. Joseph and St. John came to the Irish people with. And that message is needed now more than ever in Ireland. And it is relevant to young and old.
Well, Campbell, thank you so much. Campbell Miller from EWTN Ireland and director and producer of the film Hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.